At the end of 1938, Europe was once again inflamed with the passion of war. Italy had conquered Ethiopia. Fascism had overpowered Spain in a brutal civil war. Germany had remilitarized and annexed her neighbors Austria and Czechoslovakia. Britain's Anthony Eden protesting policies of appeasement warned America, all democracies are being threatened by the now expanding fascist powers. Then in September 1939, Hitler's panzer divisions raced through Poland, all of Europe now prepared for battle. But as in World War I, Americans hoped to stay neutral, while at the same time siding with the Allies.
I have seen a war on land and sea.
Not content with Poland, in 1940 Hitler unleashed his armies on Western Europe. The countries fell like bowling pins, and by year's end, only Britain was left unoccupied. In December, Roosevelt, elected to an unprecedented third term, told the American people that the U.S. must provide an arsenal of democracy for those opposing the Axis powers.
We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is
A month later, he laid out a Lend-Lease agreement that would provide Great Britain with essential war materials. Roosevelt argued that America must defend the four essential freedoms: the freedom of speech and expression, the freedom of worship, freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. Congress quickly passed the Lend-Lease Act, empowering the president to supply arms to any country he determined to be in U.S. vital interests. The initial appropriation was $7 billion. By war's end, the U.S. extended over $50 billion in aid to the Allies. By the summer 1941, American shipping to Britain came under attack by German U-boats, and an unofficial war began between the United States and Germany. Then on December 7, 1941, Germany's Axis partner, Japan, attacked Pearl Harbor. The next day, America declared war on Japan. 3 days later, on Germany and Italy. The nation, which a Japanese diplomat called a slumbering giant, was about to awaken from the sluggishness of the Great Depression economy and produce the largest military buildup the world had ever seen. The war began slowly for the United States as she mobilized men and materials for the fight. From 1941 to 1945, the hearts and souls of Americans centered on the war effort as they quietly did their jobs. 60 years later, these Americans who shouldered the responsibility of preserving democracy would be heralded as the greatest generation.
My husband's in the Navy, and I want to do a job that means more than working in a department store.
Factories across the nation turned to making munitions and war supplies as the government spurred the economy with vastly increased federal spending. Congress also initiated an incredible array of wartime measures, including wage and price controls, outlawing strikes, and the rationing of rubber, gasoline, meat, sugar, coffee, butter, and consumer goods. Women took jobs in the factories as men joined armed forces. People bought war bonds and planted victory gardens. Never before had the country united in such a determined resolve. Its single-minded focus was to free humanity from fascism. Their unwavering spirit would save the world in a two-front war in Europe and the Pacific. However, the United States war in Europe actually began in North Africa in February 1943. At the battle for Tunisia's Kasserine Pass, American troops suffered defeat at the hands of Germany's Desert Fox, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. But the Americans, led by General George S. Patton, quickly learned how to outmaneuver the German forces. By May 1943, Axis losses amounted to 500,000 men, and Rommel was driven from North Africa. Allied strategy then shifted northward, with amphibious assaults on Sicily and Italy. Italy surrendered on September 8, 1943. From 1941 to 43, the Soviet Union reeled under heavy blows from German aircraft and ground forces. Stalin begged President Franklin Roosevelt and Britain's Prime Minister Churchill to open a second front, but England disagreed, and they postponed the attack until 1944. Then in 1943, the Soviet army stopped the German juggernaut with their heroic stand at Stalingrad. That stand turned the tide of war in the Allies' favor and began the determined advance towards Berlin. In that same year, the Allies named General Dwight David Eisenhower as the overall commander in Europe. At the beginning of 1944, Roosevelt announced to the American people that the Allies would open a second front in Western Europe, a front that would essentially box in the Germans and bring a quick end to the war. On June 6th, the greatest invasion in the history of mankind took place. Using 4,000 ships and 10,000 airplanes, the Allies struck Normandy and put ashore 175,000 troops on the beaches of France. The Allies quickly broke out of their beachhead in Normandy. Patton's Third Army swept through Brittany, tearing a gaping hole in the German defenses. By the fall of 1944, American and British divisions liberated France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. In December, they turned back a massive German counterattack in the Battle of the Bulge. The Soviets pressed through Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Poland, and Romania. Finally, the Americans entered Germany, and in April 1945, they halted their advance at the Elbe River, while the Soviets took Berlin. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945.